Good evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Cambodia and Global Dialogue or Southeast Asia TV. Tonight, as you can see from the panel, it's a big panel, but they're all my friends. And the interesting part is that tonight we can talk quite a bit about the role of the private sector, but more than private sector, the role of foreign business association, how they contribute to the development of this country, the dialogue with the policymaker, the outreach with the local business community. So I have Matthew who, well, anyway, I'm not going to introduce you. Why don't I let you all introduce yourself? All right, start with Matthew.
Thank you. I've been here for 25 years in Cambodia. So 10 years, always in law, the first 10 years in legal development work, and the last 15 years in private sector law with you for the last 6 years. So in that last 15 years, though, is when I sort of started getting involved in the business associations. And like I was saying earlier, I mean, role really in that whole area is to get involved in advocacy, to try and develop business, for the country, both in our own communities, foreign communities, well within the Cambodian local community.
You were BritCham, right?
Correct, yeah.
BritCham.
And on the board with Sandra, CAMFEBA, and on the board with of EuroCham as the BritCham representative.
Okay.
Yeah, so
All right, Sandra, my friend, how long have we known each other?
We have known each other for 15 years, I think.
Yeah.
I came to Cambodia in 2001, so I'm also going on to nearly 20 years in Cambodia.
Wow.
I'm an entrepreneur. I started a human resource company in 2005 called HR in Cambodia, and that same year I joined CAMFEBA, which is the Cambodian Federation of Employers and Business Associations. And that business association represents private sector towards the government and towards the International Labour Organization on labour and social affairs mostly. We will then work very closely with our colleagues in the EuroCham, in the British Chamber, American Chamber, the Cambodian Chamber of Commerce, to coordinate the development of labour laws in the country, social security laws in the country, education and training in Cambodia, and then also do a lot of work related to representing Cambodia in ASEAN and also internationally in Geneva in the International Labour Conference. CAMFEBA has a membership base of about 3,000 companies, really representing all industries in the country. And today I'm currently the Vice President of CAMFEBA in charge of marketing and international relations, specifically with the International Labour Organization.
Great. Blaise?
Yes, so thank you. I've been in Cambodia for 20 years myself, 5 years with the European Chamber of Commerce, where I established the advocacy program, and for the past year and a half I've been the executive director of the European Chamber of Commerce. So we do a lot of things, we do a lot of advocacy, we do a lot of promoting Cambodia outside as a trade and investment destination for businesses, especially European businesses. We also do services, we provide market studies, we try to connect companies with the markets to understand the market and with potential partners. And as a chamber we do a lot of events. We have 340 members today. We are a member of CAMFEBA because CAMFEBA is a federation of associations, and indeed we include the bilateral European chambers like BritCham, half in half out of course, but still, and the French chamber and the German chamber and others. So this is what I do.
All right. Well, combined together we have about 60 years of exposure to Cambodia private sector. No, it's interesting because I mean we look back, Matt, when we knew each other way back in '94. I'm now analyzing a bit how the growth of the private sector have contributed to the development of this country. And it's interesting that in the early days, the private sector was extremely weak. And when I look at their contribution to policy making, to legislative making, to business development, extremely weak. And then you fast forward 20 years later, you can see a very dynamic, EuroCham, BritCham, and CAMFEBA, of course, has been very much at the forefront on the social legislation, labor, the national, social security, that sort of thing. But maybe I start with Matt. Your perspective on the evolution. What have you seen in terms of dramatic turning point from the private sector? At what years, what decade? Okay, if we take 93 as a starting point, okay, after the Paris Peace Accord, what period you think it's sort of like a substantial shift where you feel that the private sector have actually are in position to contribute to the policy or legislation making of this country?
I think for me it all took place after the year 2000. So I think 1993 when we first arrived, it was hardly even post-war, it was still pretty much a war situation at that time. So all of the business at that time was sort of owner-run individuals coming in, probably assisting the UN, tradesmen, setting up businesses of that nature. They weren't really big conglomerates, big corporates. And then we had the events of 97, and then all the way through to 2003. It was really the 2000s. I think a lot of it is to do with, being a lawyer, I'm a bit biased this way, but with legislative framework started to come into place around the year 2000. In fact, I think CAMFEBA established itself around the year 2000 from memory. So really when we started to get this legislative framework in place, where the big corporates could come in and actually start operating, they needed a framework. And we've seen it bit by bit since then. We've seen it as an industry comes in, the industry will come in first, or think about coming in, and the government will put the framework in. We're seeing it right now with the life insurance, for example. So the industry comes in, they put the legislative framework in place. For me, that all kind of started to happen, I think, just after the year 2000. And when we started to get some substantive laws in place, I think we got some assistance with that. The law depended on where the consultant came from, really, who wrote it. But really, it was that push on legislation. I think a lot of that actually was the WTO. When that happened, there was a lot of legislative framework in place, and that really helped the big corporates come in. Before then, it really was owner-run individuals in a particular sector, but it wasn't until, for me, after the year 2000, I think.
And this is where CAMFEBA came to play, because it has a lot to do at that time with the export to the US, the linkage with the labor, respect of the labor law, with the issuing of the license for export. So I think you were involved at that time as HR Inc., right? More on the human resource development, right? But CAMFEBA, again, at that time was quite a young organization. What motivates the creation of CAMFEBA? How you've been able to mobilize, and like Blaise, you said, that CAMFEBA is sort of like a federation of all employers, that sort of thing. The employer.
Employers. So in 97 our labour law was established, and that was also very much sort of when we started garment sector, really. And the garment industry was asked by the Ministry of Commerce to set up an association to be able to coordinate and to also be able to represent the industry overseas, and to also bring in new investors into the country. After a trade delegation went to the US, there was the agreement to have labour standards and the ILO to come in and monitor and make sure that the birth and the growth of our garment industry is well represented and that has good labour standards. GMAC, which is the Garment Manufacturers Association of Cambodia, of course could not represent all industries in Cambodia. And every country that is a member of the ILO, the International Labour Organization, which Cambodia is, and this year is our 50-year celebration of being a member of the ILO, we needed to establish an employers organization. So it was really with the trade negotiations with the US that CAMFEBA was established, and we brought all the industries and the big companies that were here, some of the breweries, some accounting firms, all came together to start the Employers Association and the Federation of Employers that represents all different sectors. So I joined the association in 2005, about 4 or 5 years after it was started. And in the beginning, it was very, we were very small, but also Cambodia did not have a big industry. The environment in 2000-2001 was just full of NGOs, a lot of NGOs working, and there wasn't a very vibrant private sector. But we've seen all of that change. For me, a lot of the change started happening in 2008, 9, 10, especially with the influx of banks coming in. Then you started having all the talent challenges and skills challenges. But CAMFEBA has really been there in the development of all the key framework laws for Cambodia and continue to help coordinate within the country on all those matters.
We'll get back on this HR later, but Blaise, it's interesting that EuroCham is probably the last to come in the game because it's European Chamber, right?
Yes.
What was the genesis of EuroCham?
Well, I mean, it's true that initially you had a bilateral chamber, so you had a dynamic French chamber, a German chamber, BritCham has always been here as well, you know. But they were like business clubs doing well in terms of networking. But
yes,
clubs, exactly. But indeed, you know, because Cambodia has been growing so fast, they realized that it was very important to be able to accompany the evolution of the country and of the regulatory framework, which has to adapt to this fast economic growth. So the original idea was to get together and to create a larger entity, a more influential entity, in order to actually do advocacy, which means to reach out to the government, to promote public-private dialogue, and to give the input and the feedback of the private sector to the government, who was already, you know, of course, thinking about updating and adapting the legal framework to what had become a fast-growing economy. Because yes, I mean, originally you had what? Garment, tourism, and NGOs. 20 years ago you come to Cambodia, you look for a job in an NGO. And today, of course, you have such a big private sector. And I think a determining fact has been maybe also the growth of services, you know, of all kinds, which has helped Cambodia to become something more than just an NGO/garment/tourism economy. And all of this needs to be accompanied by an efficient legal framework. The government, you know, is willing to continue promoting this growth, and it's very important for the private sector to be able to be part of this as a partner of dialogue. So that was the main motivation for the creation of EuroCham in 2011. So indeed, being the youngest one. Here today.
All right, that's good. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I want to go back to BritCham, since BritCham is probably one of the oldest entity, and what have you done? What sort of a moment of pride that you know you feel that BritCham have really, you know, sort of like set the stage in Cambodia? Yeah, Matt. All right. So according to Blaise, your BritCham is one of the first few pioneers to break into this young private sector mindset. At that time, you know, if you look at the Cambodia structure of business, are mostly mom and pop. It's quite interesting that I do mentor quite a bit of young family, and every one of them told me that, look, when their parent in 93, when they start, they're mom and pop. So they save the money, you know, 96, 97, 98. They got some money, they send me to this school, and then I got a scholarship to study abroad. And 5-6 years later, I come back, but the family business has grown so much. So now I start to take over. I speak English. I used to work in Australia as an intern. We pay tax. We have proper, you know, joint venture agreement. So this is the shift of mindset of the mom and pop entrepreneurial spirit. I do whatever, I don't need to pay tax. And then to the children who inherit the family business, but with a background of a country that are sophisticated, right? And I think BritCham probably have a lot to do, because you through BritCham you have enabled quite a lot of Cambodians to study in the UK, scholarship, conference, seminar, that sort of thing. But tell us a bit what BritCham had done.
Yeah, no, I think it's right. A point was made earlier that you know, the chambers primarily were clubs. I think initially. So when BritCham started, I don't actually know when it started, way back when, but I was in the NGO sector in those days. But they started out pretty much as social clubs. Maybe people from those particular countries who are doing business in this country getting together for Friday afternoon drinks. And it's evolved tremendously since then into a reputable organisation. It's now attracts the likes of Prudential and Jardines and these sorts of people onto the board. So it's something that's evolved very organically, depending on who the members were at any given time. As you mentioned earlier, we didn't have a robust business sector in the early days, so you really didn't get high caliber sort of members of these clubs in those days. As the business community picked up, we've started to attract more. They went to these clubs as basically the only show in town to join in terms of their own networking really in those days. But I think what really turned the point for a lot of the chambers was when they stepped up to start to do advocacy. I think CAMFEBA always was, in a sense. CAMFEBA was set up for that very purpose. The government needed a voice for the employers. The business associations weren't. So when EuroCham came about, and we, with BritCham, with the French Cham, with the German, came together, really it was robust, big enough as a mass to take on advocacy. I think for the chambers, that's really the point of pride. It's more the ability, the government now listens to these chambers, asking for opinions on how to do business better in Cambodia. And that, I think that really is where they came into their own.
I'm jumping to Blaise because I want to link on this advocacy because Blaise, you helped start the program on advocacy with EuroCham. What motivates that decision?
I mean, I think it's clear. It's important. It's important for the private sector to be able to give input and feedback to the government. But I think also the government is expecting to have a kind of organized voice from the private sector.
One voice.
One voice. So I mean, of course, we cannot pretend to speak in the name of the entire private sector, but at least we can bring together several chambers, which we did under the EuroCham umbrella, and we try to, because we are lucky to have resources, to be able to have a professional team and so on. So we try to really organize ourselves in order to give structured feedback and inputs to the government. And so for the past 4 years and a half, we've been really reaching out to as many ministries as possible, at least those who are in charge of the sectors where our members are active, to provide this input and feedback. But we also try to reach out to the other business associations.
Okay.
We are close to everybody, including the Cambodia Chamber of Commerce, of course, and other associations, so that we can, as much as possible, encourage a one-voice approach. And it's possible whenever you have an issue that is common to all, of course, first and foremost, we have to work for our members, but if we can federate and align with other associations and we come to the government as a one voice, representing the entire private sector, it's very useful to tell the government, this is missing. If you address that point, you can be more competitive. If you address that point, the private sector...
Isn't it one of your flagship output is the white book?
It is. So the white book, and by the way, our third white book will be launched next Monday. So
in the past, your white book, do you monitor how many of these recommendation was actually taken by government and actually implemented?
We more than monitor. We take it to the ministries and we ask to have meetings on it, and we request even written answers. So we have first of all what we call a policy response is not only a yes, because we understand that we may raise a solution, a proposal, but it's about dialogue. So every time there is a decision that is having an impact on what we said, or every time we have an answer, even if it's a motivated no, but there has been a discussion, we consider it to be a policy response. And so the rate of policy responses to our first white book was 60%. To our second white book, it was 60%, but with all the recent reforms that have been announced, for the past quarter, it has raised to 75%, which is huge. But again, it's not always a yes, but it's the level of dialogue, I would say. And now we are launching the next white book on next Monday, so we'll see. But I think it's also about being proactive. You should not expect the government to just pay attention to you. You have to reach out and engage. And there are ways to do that. It's not about pointing finger. It's really about engaging and trying to find solutions together.
Which pretty much cut across, right? Because you mentioned the service sector is there. It's a bit a cross-cutting industry why?
It's cross-cutting, but it's true that because we do this by collecting input and feedback from our members. It's not just coming out of
Yes.
my head, or of the box.
Yeah.
It's really coming from the members. So we can do this only in the fields where our members are present.
Okay.
So our white book is focused on a number of sectors, but including tax, which is
Yes,
of course cross-cutting and so
Your
on.
strength there.
Indeed, but for instance HR and so on, but for instance garment, we have few members in garment, so we would more encourage, like for instance GMAC to do it, and we would be ready to support that as well.
Okay.
Nice.
You mentioned GMAC, I have to shift to Sandra, because Sandra, I mean, yes, BritCham do a lot of advocacy, EuroCham, you do a broad policy response covering many different sectors, but they're a bit small relative to CAMFEBA, which focus quite a bit with the garment and the footwear. You're talking about what, nearly 1 million people working in that sector, and you know very well how we are now working very hard to try to explain to the European Union the effect on the everything but arm, that we will, if they take any decision, that will affect 800,000 direct worker, probably indirectly a couple more million. So I think CAMFEBA play a big role there, because you're very focused on a few industry, but big industry, labor intensive. How has CAMFEBA over the year helped sort of like coordinate, synergize, structure, advise, dialogue on social issue?
Right. So I think actually, if I can just comment, I think the EBA challenge that we have is a really good example in terms of how Blaise was talking about how all business associations were really involved. That had the biggest impact for the garment industry, Garment Manufacturers Association, but it's coming from the European Union. So we did see that the EuroCham was very, very on the forefront, meeting with delegations, issuing statements and letters, and following and lobbying to the highest levels. There, I think the coordination of the different business associations is extremely important. For CAMFEBA as a federation, we have to represent all sectors. So it's the big sectors and the small sectors, including telecom sectors, including education sectors, including hospitality. So really, without representing the majority of sectors, we can't be a federation. When we look at the garment sector itself, a lot of the work around the EBA process was certainly done by the industry association itself, GMAT, with CAMFEBA supporting in the background, as all the business associations did, in issuing letters, in pushing on the key points we wanted to ensure that we keep our trade preferences, and then also meeting with all the delegations that came into the country. We also regularly meet with, when we're requested, with the UNHCR on the human rights issues coming in. So CAMFEBA will really coordinate all of those issues. When we have, for example, a new law coming, being drafted, and I can use the trade union law as an example, where I was negotiating the law, we really get inputs from all the other business associations and directly from businesses on the draft laws. We consolidate those laws. We have meetings with members to streamline a voice and a direction that we want to go in, and then go into negotiations. I think because we have such a rich membership base, when we're working on social security law, we can bring in insurance companies and banking sector to look at how you invest funds, how you draft laws, how you...
I think on that one, I would say your organization probably is the only organization that have a harder work, because you have to deal with the employer, you have to deal with the union, the worker, and you have to deal with the government.
Right.
So basically, it's like now, I have to deal with 3 of you.
Right, exactly.
But it's interesting from the point of view, these 3 stakeholders are not necessarily sharing the same vision on how a particular law, social law, should be, right? As different than a BritCham advice on, in this case, the building code, for example, right? The construction law, that sort of thing. So it's much easier because you basically deal with one counterpart, right? Which is the government who draft the law, right? But BritCham have done quite a bit in terms of advising legislation, no?
We do it. We're actually doing it largely now through EuroCham. Actually,
Okay.
we were saying before. So, because of that, the advent of EuroCham 6 years ago, maybe 6-7 years ago now, EuroCham,
2011,
that really
6 years ago.
changed the landscape.
Okay.
It makes the ability. But it's a good point you make actually. And with my CAMFEBA hat, I think one of the unique but really important things is the industrial relations. I mean, this issue, because it cuts across. Of course, it started in the garment sector, but when we saw those strikes break out, when the arbitration cases first started in the hotel sector, these are industrial relations related, and that's across any sector. Everybody has
That
an
was
employer-
Ruffle at that time, right? I
Raffles,
recall.
Intercon, all of them, yeah.
Yes,
But
yes.
it was, everybody has the employer-employee relationship going on. So this is where CAMFEBA sort of have to advocate around that, and that's tough in a developing, business sector like Cambodia, where it's got a very robust union movement. So I think that's the most challenging thing for pretty much all of the business associations is that.
So thanks, Matt. But Sandra, back to the industry. So you see a very, I would say, unified employer position, a unified worker position, unified government position. How do you guys reconcile all these three divergent views? That must take a lot of effort.
I think within any business association, you definitely have different views because you
Yes.
have a lot of different sectors who are dealing with a lot of different issues. At the end of the day, it comes down to a core team where we are sort of streamlining what we feel is the best way forward, considering a context of laws that we communicate back to our members. And then within negotiating forums and in the labour and social sector, we absolutely have to sit at the table with government and with the unions, and we negotiate and negotiate until we have a outcome. When there are issues that still need to be decided, very often the government will decide in the context of broader laws and the broader legal framework. But it's tripartite negotiations for us, and whether it's labour law, social security law, the government gives us these forums where we all around the table and spend a significant amount of time negotiating, raising points of view, to make sure that laws are flexible and good for our very fast developing economy, and that's very important.
Blaise, just on that, right? Because they're dealing with three people, three stakeholders. In your white book, do you, before you reach your government, you have your own internal consultation, right?
We do.
And then with the recommendation, you go to the government for dialogue, right?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
We do that. I mean, I think the process is very important. We cover about 9-10 sectors, right? So I mean, we do tax, we do labor, real estate and construction, automotive, green business, healthcare. We cover them every time. We have a way of structure where we consult our members, where we create sectoral committees. Each sectoral committee has elected representatives, and we have to find a common consensual recommendation that everybody would agree. Because once we have identified these ones, we are confident that when we bring it to the government, it represents usually the position of the compliant private sector. Because we know that we have a lot of the positions we are defending which are shared by others as well. This is why we are very confident to bring it. And I mean, you went to our tax forum in Siem Reap. You heard His Excellency Rendall saying that the work that is done by EuroCham is useful for the entire private sector. This is really our ideal position, where we promote ideas that are going to help Cambodia's competitiveness and ease of doing business in general.
Blaise, you touch a good point that tell me it's time to stop for one more break. Because based on the point you mentioned about Siem Reap, when we come back, I want to talk a bit more how the international chamber like this work with the local and beyond Phnom Penh, because Cambodia is not Phnom Penh. Phnom Penh is not Cambodia. The dynamic are very different. Matt, Blaise touched a good point. He mentioned about the tax forum EuroCham organized in Siem Reap, which is great, packed. People want to know what's happening. The government official, the tax department went there, Kumba went there. In fact, he spoke for 2 hours, right? I mean, it's like exciting because you want to hear it straight from the horse mouth. what he see from his tax reform, which is great. But not every time you have such an opportunity. If it's not for EuroCham, it'd be very difficult to have organized an event like that, right? So the way I see it is like this. As I said in the introduction, that the Cambodian private sector have come a long way. You have I wouldn't say the decline, but I would say the lesser importance of the big, the older family, because they're getting older. But then you see the rise of the younger family. It could be from the old family, but it's their children, more educated, more keen about having a clear business model on doing business, not necessarily afraid of competition from ASEAN or from outside the country. So different dynamics. So they could relate to the work that the association are doing. How do you see, or maybe not how do you see, but do you see in now moving forward, association like your association reaching out more to the local Cambodian association?
Yeah, no, it's something that issue of it gets back to this one voice issue. It's one voice of the employers, one voice of the business community. I mean, that business community at the moment, when we look at it, we cover a sort of Eurocentric look from EuroCham, BritCham perspective. That's who EuroCham's made up naturally of European members, and then in BritCham, etc., etc. But even if we interacted with it, it would be with AmCham, it would be with CAMCham, it would be with OzCham. What we really need to start doing, what we started to do the last couple of years, we changed our secretariat BritCham to be Cambodian run, which is interesting. We've been a Paul on this girl that came on board because she reached out to the Cambodian community. We started working with the Youth Entrepreneurs Association. And that was an interesting dynamic. That was because they're business, like you mentioned, they're the youth that have basically taken over the parents' businesses, and they've gone into different sectors. Franchising is an interesting one. Franchising hotels. So this has taken them outside of Phnom Penh. This has taken them up to Siem Reap and places like this. So we started working a lot with YEAC, and doing events in Siem Reap for that very reason. So a lot of their members were based up there. So this one voice thing, we needed to make it one voice being everyone in the business sector. But actually even goes beyond that, because another thing we've really got to try, and we haven't made too much headway on, we need to, is it also includes the non-European, non-Anglo, so, what are the Japanese doing? What are the Koreans doing? I mean, how do we, because they're part of this dynamic, and when we speak with the business, we don't really, it'd be interesting to see what their views are on some of these issues we raise. But certainly I think we've made headway on the Cambodian side. I think, and Blaise can speak about EuroCham, it's a big thing for us now. Big thing for us now.
It's very true, because we have always tried to reach out to those local associations. We have an MOU with the Cambodia Chamber of Commerce. We launch our white book next week, actually on the panel to launch it. We have the government, Excellency Agenda. We have the board member of the Japanese Business Association. We have the chairman of the Young Entrepreneur Association and the chairman of EuroCham. So it is very important because, again, we will find ways to align with each other, and the government will appreciate this one voice. And two, as you say, you have this new generation of business people. They also have an interest in compliance, because the real issue, more and more, as regulations are being built, as laws are being written, as the whole thing is being adapted to the Cambodian economy, the real issue in the end will be whether everybody is playing by the book or not. That's the real issue. It's compliance. So you sometimes
equal playing field.
Yes, you sometimes hear people saying that only the foreigners pay tax and the others and the local don't pay. Actually, it's not really true, because we partner with local entrepreneurs who, because they have franchise, because they have the right to import a specific product into Cambodia, they want their competition to play by the book, because they have an interest in compliance, because they have a franchise, because they have an exclusive right of import, and so on and so forth. So it is very important to reach out to them. And if you talk about the province, yes, I think, the long story is that, because you say says straightforwardly, 15 years ago, to pay tax or to have a work permit in Cambodia was a joke. It was a joke. Today it's not a joke anymore. But in Phnom Penh, we are at a certain stage, but the further you go from the center, the more you get a little bit back in time as well. So when we go to Siem Reap, for instance, we are very happy to promote tax compliance, and we see a lot of people coming, and to fill that room of 200 people, we relied on CAMFEBA, we relied on the young entrepreneurs, on the women entrepreneurs, and everybody, so that people, can slowly get into this effort made by the government and supported by companies like our members to expand compliance.
Sandra, again, I still look at CAMFEBA as a very important player in this thing. How how effective are you in the province area? Because many of the garment factory are outside Phnom Penh.
Right.
So in different province.
Right. I think the provincial and reaching out to local businesses has to be a priority for all business associations to bring in that collective one business voice. Not only in terms of our membership base, but in terms of our board structures as well, which I know CAMFEBA has really tried to focus on getting Cambodian leadership onto the board of its governing body. And that has been difficult over the years.
Yeah.
But we have started making headways, and today we have one woman and a gentleman from the HR sector who are both entrepreneurs but also now joining the business associations. And that is really important for us because we need to see that our board structure and our governing structure is also reflecting the economy. CAMFEBA actually has a satellite office in Siem Reap where we work directly with the sectors over there. We work directly with businesses in Sihanoukville and other provinces, but we don't have offices in those areas, primarily because we don't have budget to do that.
Okay.
But certainly board members will travel and participate in events when they are needed. Our services, though, reach across the country. We will help members all over the country with labour disputes, with understanding how to implement the labour law or social laws and understand what is coming. And I think as we see more economic activity in other provinces, yes, there will become a need for all of us to have offices in other provinces to coordinate more effectively.
Yeah, because I was working with the Ministry of Public Work and Transport. They are now in the process to prepare a master plan on transport and logistics. And it's interesting when you look at the master plan, it's all about connecting.
Right.
Within Cambodia, the key development pole, different region have different economic dimension, but mainly is connect inward, but as well as a country connect outward to the Mekong region. ACMEC now, for example, this year our Prime Minister Sandra is chairing the ACMEC. ACMEC is a development strategy of the three rivers in the Mekong region. The A stands for Ayeyawadi, which is in Myanmar. The C is Chao Phraya in Thailand, and then the M is Mekong, which is covering Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. But all this is part of an integral, sort of like a sub-regional development framework. The Mekong region is now sort of like the darling of the major development partner because it's a source of growth.
Right.
It's not a source of growth, right? So we have the Mekong with Japan, Mekong with China, Mekong with US, with India, Republic of Korea. So I think ultimately we cannot look at the private sector as only in Phnom Penh or in Siem Reap for that matter. It's other area. Battambang, a granary of Asia, Mondulkiri, Ratnakiri as the rubber area, that sort of thing, right? So I think I'm quite excited about the prospect, the role of international, no more club now because you all have your charter and everything, but you come a long way. Anyway, we're almost at the end of the show, but I want to give you a few minutes. Just what do you want to leave behind in terms of message for the audience from your perspective as BritCham? What do you see in the future?
I think one of the points that we didn't touch on so much was the purpose of business chambers is this business matching thing. So for the as we reach out to the Cambodian community, they're now at a situation where they can start getting joint ventures, attracting partnerships. The chambers are really a place for them to go if they're looking to partner with these international players coming into Cambodia. So I think that's something I think is not that quite well appreciated and known by the local community. So for us to interact more, because we're looking for partners, our clients are looking for local partners, and these really are forums that can be used at. So I think the message I'd like to send out is for the Cambodian business community to realise that and sort of start to engage with the chambers more for their own benefit, for that purpose, which is something really I don't think is that well known about the foreign chambers here.
So that's a good point. instill that sense that look, we have some value add more than just
There's
advocacy.
opportunities,
It's about
opportunities
business
for business,
opportunity,
absolutely.
linking up there,
We
right?
can help do that, absolutely.
Yeah. Right. So that could be one of the something to look forward to from BritCham
Yeah, to
perspective.
develop that side of
Well,
as well, yeah.
look, let's be real. After Brexit, I mean, the UK is free to
That's
negotiate
right.
on their own, right? Yes. Right. So let's make sure we have a piece of the post-Brexit pie with the British.
Yeah, do it through BritCham.
Exactly. All right. Sandra?
I want to encourage people to be more involved in business associations, and particularly in CAMFEBA, because our issues are cross-cutting. And I would really like to see more young Cambodian leadership involved in these business associations and leading and talking at these key platforms, both in Cambodia, regionally and internationally, where we really go and represent Cambodia. As a foreigner, I'm very fortunate and very grateful to be able to do that for Cambodia, for the business community. But for me, a legacy would be having more Cambodian involvement, where we can have Cambodian speakers and leaders and leading and championing very difficult issues, from child labor to skills development to education and training. It's very important that young business leaders contribute back to society.
All right. Blaise?
Well, I mean, a little bit also to echo that, I think all the things we are doing, actually, I would like to see down the road, how many years from now, the Cambodia Chamber of Commerce playing fully its role doing all these things. They have branches in the provinces, they are the official chamber. They could federate so many members. They need to further structure themselves. They need the governance, need to develop, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, this is what should be the case. To have this strong, national chamber with provincial branches playing this role and all of us supporting it. But I think that for the moment we are somehow all, playing a role that ultimately should be theirs.
Should be subsumed.
Yes.
Into national. But I think, to be fair to them, I mean, I know most of the gentlemen for all years in Cambodia, language is an issue for them. That's why.
Yeah, they will build. I mean, it's all about, if I look at EuroCham, 8 years ago and even 5 years ago and today, we all improve, we all develop. So ultimately, if you look at France, there are this CCI, this network of French chamber. I mean, it's huge, it's worldwide, it's nationwide. It should be an ultimate goal, so that you have a local institution which is strong and professional enough to play this role. I'm not saying it's today, but I think it should be the ultimate objective, so that Cambodia has their own national chamber playing that
But do you
role.
think that I mean, the fact that these are foreign chambers,
Yes.
do you think that the Cambodians then perceive it as, well, it's not really our chamber? I mean, EuroCham should be run by Europeans, ASEAN should be run by
of course.
Australians, and BritCham should be run by
Definitely.
Brits.
I mean, I think the foreign chambers will always have a role to play, especially in a country that is so connected to to export and welcome in FDI. I mean, the rate of FDI to GDP is huge. The export are important, but I think it's important to have also a local business community that is well organized and strong, and we will continue to work with them as we already do. It's a constellation. Right?
And I think, to me, it just happened that in this moment in time, sometimes a lot of things that you all have mentioned are development issue, right? I mean, we care, we develop, we want to eventually have a vision to have more Cambodian. But it's interesting that Cambodia is going through a moment in time now that more than ever we need a strong voice from the private sector in the context of the EBA, for example. Individually, you can never make any impact. But as federation, as a association of employer, who work with the union, because labor is an issue with the EPA, so you can tell a lot what you're doing, right? Yeah. So this is something I would say, don't underestimate the power of your collectivity in terms of caring for the local stakeholder who have no voice. And my pitch, when I go to meet the European Union EBA discussion, I always say that we're here, you know, trying to represent the voice of the no voice, which is the 800,000 workers who will be affected by whatever decision the European Union will take, right? If they don't suspend, they will have the prosperity going on, you know, have some money saved, sent to their father, their mother in the countryside. If you suspend the trade preference, you will see a dramatic drop below the poverty line, that sort of thing, you know. And to me, it's a big burden. It's a big burden to I would say,
That's
to feel.
what we have been saying for the
Yeah.
last year indeed altogether.
But anyway, we're coming to the end of the show, and for me, 45 minutes was never enough for 1-to-1. Imagine 1-to-3. But thank you so much for coming,
Thank you so
Matt.
much.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Sandra.
Thank you, Siphana.
Yeah, Blaise. So I hope I will see you much sooner than 20 years later. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, done. That was fast.
Done.